Welcome into the Solo Shot Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Dom Manna. Happy Solo Shot Friday edition yet again. We're here giving you some time to digest what happened in the Division Series and appreciate each and every one of you checking this out live, as well as those who are listening to it between now and the early days of the Championship Series that starts on Sunday. Postseason baseball is absolutely electric, and for so many people that are retractors of baseball, even they will give postseason baseball its flowers. Usually, hockey's playoffs is considered the best, and then people will debate, and baseball is usually right in the discussion, if not the unanimous number two. And I think that's a really amazing thing that baseball has that kind of energy. And I think that we really leveled things up from the wild card series to the division series. You look at the wild card series and Tampa Bay, I know they had the 3:00 starts and Tropicana's not in a very friendly travel place, but they're in the playoffs despite all their injuries, despite the Wander Franco situation, and they can't pack the place for game one. Come on. And you look across the league, the attendance was so much better during the division series than it was during the wild card round. And I know the games count for more and it's a longer series. So you're hoping that there's 3, 4, 5 games versus 2 max in the wild card round. It's really awesome to see all the fan bases showing out. And that's why Wild World of Sports is the name of this intro. It's because as much as there is the thrill of victory, there is also the agony of defeat. And I think the fans showed out no matter what in this series. The home fans were awesome, even when their teams weren't hitting or weren't pitching well enough to advance. Baseball playoffs is just full of those moments of amazing home runs, defensive plays, pitching outings, and all the mess ups and situations that could have been handled better. And we're going to get into all these division series outcomes, what could have been different, what it was. And I just appreciate each and every one of you for stopping by and checking out the program. If you like following the baseball season with me, really appreciate if you subscribe to the channel, leave me a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and share the show with a friend that loves baseball just as much as we do, because I'm going to keep coming at you every week with more and more baseball content. Will be around the bases, just like here in the NLDS. I'm talking about the Dodgers, who now in their last 4 162 game seasons, because you have to remember they won that Mickey Mouse championship during the 60 game COVID year, they have not advanced past the NLCS. They have not made a World Series. Now, this is a Dodgers team that I've talked about as just a model of consistency, a team that has made 11 straight playoff appearances, a team that I said has Clayton Kershaw, has Mookie Betts, has Freddie Freeman. They'll figure things out. Well, that trio figured out how to lose a series yet again to a team that they dominated during the regular season. Diamondbacks had a really awesome season. And I know my buddy Scott out there, I'm really happy for him that his Diamondbacks are going on this run. I talked about it during the wild card round, that coming back in their first 2 postseason games, the other 2 teams had reached the World Series. So it is really interesting about the Diamondbacks, and I have to give them their flowers as well. But before I do, I have to just dive into the Dodgers. They had the most games lost to injured list this year out of any team in Major League Baseball. The next 4 teams after them missed the playoffs entirely because of those injuries, in part at least. And the Dodgers, they still figured things out. Clayton Kershaw, Bobby Miller in that rotation was put together with pieces. And Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman had MVP finishing seasons. But they come into the postseason, And that's what happens in these short series. I talked about it with the wild card a little bit. If you have two good pitchers, like two pitchers that can take over a game when you only need to win 2 out of 3, that's awesome. And the same thing happens in the NLDS because it's a 5-game series. So you need 3 wins. And if those two guys can get you 2 of them, you're in really good shape. And that's what happened with Arizona. Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen flat out pitched. And they've been doing that all season for the Snakes. The Dodgers, on the other hand, Clayton Kershaw, who up until that 2020 Mickey Mouse ring was crowned as the guy who was amazing lights out during the regular season, but couldn't do it in the playoffs. And then he goes out there and he has the worst playoff outing of his career. This is a man who is a Hall of Famer. He is 56 strikeouts away, people, from the 3,000 strikeout club. And I'm really hoping this is not the last we've seen of Clayton Kershaw, but he flat out did not execute against this Diamondbacks lineup. They got to him early and often. He got 1 out in a disastrous game 1. Then you look at Bobby Miller, who was probably the Dodgers' best pitcher all season, but someone that's green in the tooth, hasn't pitched in these big games, hasn't been in the spotlight. And he goes out there and he flusters as well. Lance Lynn, it was poetic. A guy that was on the White Sox struggling, having one of the worst years of his career. And the Diamondbacks tried to trade for him during the trade deadline, but didn't get him. And then he goes out there and gets the Diamondbacks to the NLCS. But this isn't the Dodgers team that we're used to seeing in any sense of matter. There's a lot of just pieces that are around the core. And I'm really excited because the Dodgers didn't spend last offseason. And the thing that you have to look forward to as a Dodgers fan is they're going to throw a lot of money at Shohei Ohtani. They're going to be in the market for multiple pieces this offseason. And they're already a top of the league team as is. Adding to it can maybe get them back to a World Series in the next couple years. Dodgers fans, I'm sorry. I really thought you guys could at least advance to the CS. And unfortunately, the chalky pick did not work. And the hot Diamondbacks came into town playing with great energy and did their job. Just like Mookie Betts said, they're getting paid a lot of money to play baseball as well. And even when the odds are stacked against you, it's a best of 5. If you don't give your best, anybody can get got. The NLDS that just ended, the only NLDS to go to 4 games, was the Phillies and the Braves. And I talked about it. The Braves, they are the same boat as the Dodgers, a team that I expected, based on their regular season and their dominance, to make it past a round. I said if they don't make the World Series, it's a failure. And if you look at this team, the best modern offense we've seen, they're not going to go down as a top 10 team of all time. I don't care how historic they were. You win 1 playoff game, that's not good enough. The Philadelphia Phillies had an amazing run in the playoffs last year, are on their way this year to get back to the World Series. But the Braves just flat out didn't do what they needed to do. And part of that is on their pitching. Spencer Strider, Max Fried, like they got to those guys. But really, it was the offense that got quieted by the Zach Wheelers of the world. Aaron Nola holding them in check. This Braves offense was marketed to be the murderer's row of this century, or at least of this decade. And they go out there, and Brian Snitker decides to change the lineup in game 1 for the first time all season. Switches the order up. They've had a little bit of a break, which probably is a good thing. A lot of those guys played 158 plus games. They're core players. And they go out there and they just lay an egg in 3 out of 4 games. And they get eliminated. A lot of people are saying the bye is not an advantage, even though the wild card round it's been mostly sweeps. And I'm not going to sit here and say that having 5, 6 days off is the reason why these juggernaut teams lost. You got to look yourself in the mirror, Braves fans. You have this core locked up. You're going to be just fine. But the difference between a great run in a dynasty is making it to the World Series. And that's why the Astros are still on dynasty watch, because of making the ALCS as many times as they have, is making the World Series as many times as they have, is having 2 championships in 5 years and going on 6. This is going to be an interesting thing to look back at on this Braves squad that was able to win the World Series without Ronald Acuna. But when Ronald Acuna is there and has the historic season, they fall short. And I'm hoping, for baseball's sake, that Ronald Acuna stays healthy the whole rest of his career. I know he's had early injury problems, but it's going to be interesting to look at this Braves team, because it's like, what do you fix? They had a historic regular season. They have a lot of guys locked up on team-friendly deals. What do you fix with this team? You just have to re-roll and hope for the best next year. And just off basic variance, not everybody's going to have the season they had this year. Some will improve, some will regress. But this Braves team falling down to the Phillies in the playoffs yet again, it is a real shame for their fans and for baseball, because seeing a historic team go all the way, I said it, the 2018 Red Sox were the last team to be the best team during the regular season and win the World Series. I didn't predict them to win the World Series, but I thought at least getting there would be a step towards this being looked at as a dynasty down the road. Now we have these questions about the Dodgers and about the Braves, who are in the contention with the Astros as 3 teams that could be mini dynasties, maybe even full-on dynasties if they win enough. What's their success going to be measured by? Is it going to be by playoff appearances? Is it going to be by MVP and Cy Young trophies? Is it going to be by World Series titles? And at the end of the day, a dynasty in sports is titles. And the Braves and Dodgers just lost another awesome chance at one. Now to give my flowers to the teams that knocked them off. The Arizona Diamondbacks. They came to play, and hitting all those home runs and just keeping the line moving, they're a fun team to watch. Corbin Carroll is a legit superstar. First rookie ever with 25 home runs and 50 stolen bases. A guy who's taking pitches and giving professional at-bats. He is a beast at the top of that lineup. Ketel Marte, a guy who got MVP votes just a few years ago, is playing out of his mind during this postseason. And I think the most underrated thing is that Blue Jays trade they made in the offseason with Dalton Varsho. You don't just see Gurriel giving you an awesome performance. He made the All-Star team. But Gabriel Moreno, the other catchers 23 or younger to hit multiple home runs in the playoffs. Brian McCann, Johnny Bench. Like, he is right up there. And I'm not saying he's going to be a Hall of Fame catcher. Brian McCann's not going to be. But he is the makings of a really good everyday catcher. But I really have to give it to the pitching. I talked about it. Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly, they pitched lights out. Brandon Pfaadt, after getting killed in his wild card start, he held the Dodgers in check while he was out there in Game 3. But it's really the bullpen that's the story for me with the Diamondbacks. It looked like they were kind of on the fence of buying and selling when they traded Andrew Chafin and some pieces from their bullpen. But they added Paul Sewald, and Paul Sewald has saved 4 out of the 5 Diamondback wins this postseason. He's been awesome. And you just look at this Diamondbacks bullpen, it's not household names, but they get outs. Absolutely shoving, not afraid of anybody. It is outrageous. And I've said it before, and it's as cliche as it is, but pitching in the postseason helps you win championships. And it's not just starting pitching. bullpen performances matter. And if I had to rank the teams that were remaining in terms of bullpen, the Diamondbacks are right there for arguably the best. Now with the Phillies, their bullpen is nothing to scoff at either. Dominguez, Alvarado, Soto, Kimbrel, they've got guys, no doubt. But Zach Wheeler has really been the story here because Aaron Nola is a free agent this offseason. I'm not saying that they're not going to re-sign him because he's a very good 1B, number 2 starter, whatever you want to look at him as. But Zach Wheeler has become this team's ace. And he has 2 quality starts, been really awesome in this postseason, and he just absolutely shoved against the Braves lineup. It was impressive seeing him shove in the wild card round, but against this Braves lineup, vaunted Braves lineup, going out there and shoving the way he did, absolutely tip my cap to Zach Wheeler. Now, you look at the Phillies lineup. Nick Castellanos, only player in postseason history with back-to-back games of multi-home runs. Game 3 and Game 4, he hit 2 home runs apiece. Tied for the postseason lead in home runs so far. Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber are a lefty-righty power combo at their top of their lineup that is just awesome. But it's time that the national media gave Bryce Harper his damn flowers. This is a man who had the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's a 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid on the front cover of Sports Illustrated, hitting 400-foot home runs with his aluminum bat. In some ways, he was the LeBron James of baseball. Weight of the world on his shoulders. He has to be the next coming. He's going to be a superstar. And he has delivered. Rookie of the Year, 2 MVPs, and a guy who, in his postseason career, a guy with over an 850 OPS, 14 home runs, 650 slug. It's Bryce Harper in the playoffs and Babe Ruth. It's a great nugget from Chris Rose. But he's been amazing in these postseason runs. I know there's a lot of flack on, the year he left the Nationals win the World Series. But he helped carry Philadelphia to that World Series last year. And yet again, when he still can't really throw, he's out there making plays at first base, a position he's never played before this year, and doing everything he can to help his team win. There's not many baseball players that can take over a postseason game. It's very hard to do if you're not a pitcher. Bryce Harper is one of those players. You can see he's happy in Philadelphia. The city of Philadelphia loves him, and he plays his butt off for that city. Bryce Harper, whatever happens against Arizona and the rest of the way, I just want you to get some of the credit you deserve, because it got to the point where everybody in the world was calling him overrated. This amazing talent. He has these problems, doesn't always hustle. The numbers aren't where we thought they'd be. He is well on his way to the Hall of Fame, and I hope that we get to see him and this Phillies core raise a World Series title. If it's not this year, very soon. The ALDS was about the agony of defeat for 2 great stories. The Minnesota Twins were the first one. I said that they had an opportunity to upset the Astros, and that was actually the one series that was not an upset. And the Twins did show out. Pablo Lopez looked fantastic on the mound. Carlos Correa made that really awesome stop, and that was one of the real fight back moments I've seen this postseason. Obviously, the Braves had that magic moment with Michael Harris doubling off Bryce Harper at first base and the home run by Austin Riley, but it didn't end up mattering. The Twins were a nice story. I'm glad they got the elephant off their back of not having winning games in the postseason. But when you march Johan Santana and Joe Mauer out there for the first pitch and you lose, it's just a bad look. I think they have a bright future in Minnesota, that division. Everybody else is pieces away, and you have the core to be great in that division at least. So Minnesota, I think, will be back in the postseason, but man, it really could have been even more of a run, I think, had the energy really been there from all their pitchers. But if you look at the Houston side, it's kind of what I said about the Dodgers. They've been there before. Verlander, Valdez, Dusty Baker, Christian Javier, who was a popular sneaky Cy Young pick for a lot of people during the offseason. He was part of that postseason no-hitter, World Series no-hitter, and then he gave up one hit in an awesome start against the Twins. The Astros are a juggernaut, and they're the only team here that has the dynasty thing still looming over them, because if they can win back-to-back World Series here, it doesn't go from 2 and 5 years, it's 3 and 6 years, while also making it a fourth time. They've been in the ALCS so many times now. They know what it takes to win. They have Ryan Presley in the back of that bullpen, lights out reliever, and their lineup just continues to hit. Yordan Alvarez tied for the postseason leading home runs with 4. 4 in 3 games he had. Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman. They've been there before. Jeremy Pena was the World Series MVP last year as a rookie. He hasn't been the best, but he can hit in those situations. And Jose Abreu, who was borderline just silent during the regular season, has really turned it on. And he's been driving in a lot of runs for this Houston team and been the offensive support that he was brought in to be. So this Astros team is going to be tough to beat. But if a team can do it, it's not just because I picked the Orioles to win the World Series, and I also had my amazing pick of the Texas Rangers making the playoffs. But that series to me really was the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, to bring it full circle with the intro. The Texas Rangers, a team that I had so much faith in during the regular season, lost pitching. Bullpen was terrible, but their lineup was so freaking fun to watch. Marcus Semien has become one of my favorite players in Major League Baseball. But they were going up against my World Series pick, the team that had not been swept since Adley Rutschman was called up in May of last year. A team where, even though they had been recently historic losers, this core of young players didn't really know what losing felt like. And this was a very humbling moment. The agony of defeat, I feel for you, O's fans. I was riding the hot of the moment of Brooks Robinson passing away and then winning the AL East in 100 games and the amazing season that they've had. But the Orioles got to look themselves in the mirror now, because Kyle Bradish, as a game 1 starter, Grayson Rodriguez, as much potential as he has, he's very green, and you have him as a game 2 guy. When you fall down 1-0, they need pitching. And it doesn't help that Felix Bautista is probably not going to be available until late 2024 or 2025 with his Tommy John. That lights out closer that could have helped you if these games were closer. But the Rangers, despite their injuries, their bats were not silent. The O's bats, other than Gunnar Henderson, they really shriveled up in the moment. Most of them did not come through when they needed to. Gunnar Henderson hit over 500. He's going to be the Rookie of the Year. And the Orioles have a nice future. But if they don't get some better pitching all throughout, bullpen and in the rotation, this young core that they have for affordable prices, if they get complacent with it, they're going to waste this opportunity to raise a World Series title. And this was a great shot for them. I'm hoping that they add to pitching in the offseason and they are able to come back. But when you're in that AL East, the Rays are always good. The Blue Jays, Red Sox, and Yankees all have sour tastes in their mouths and are going to spend and make moves this season to change things up. You have to do something. You cannot stay pat and be complacent with, oh, we have a young team. They'll get more experienced and better next year. I do think these young core players, Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, tasting failure on the biggest stage, that's going to go a long way for them. But in terms of the whole lineup, the whole team, you need to invest more when they're overperforming to this extent. And in Texas, I talked about it with the two-pitcher thing. Merrill Kelly, Zach Gallen, Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler. Jordan Montgomery and Nate Eovaldi have been that for the Rangers. Now they have a 7-game set against Houston. Houston's definitely got the better pitching, bullpen especially. Lineups are close, but Texas has continued to defy the odds. And I'm going to give them a swinger's chance to beat the Astros. This lineup is hard to quiet. Corey Seager, Marcus Semien. Corey Seager walked 5 times in a damn game when his team put up double-digit runs. Their best hitter, 5 walks. They're patient. They get good pitches to hit, and they make you pay for them. Evan Carter's been amazing. Josh Young. Nate Lowe finally got in on the action. Mitch Garver's been cleaning up so many RBIs. And Adolis Garcia is a tone setter with those El Bombies. The Rangers are a scary team. And the agony of defeat with my Orioles getting swept for the first time in the Adley Rutschman era, getting one and done in the postseason when I picked them to win the World Series, that all stinks. But the thrill of victory with this Rangers team that I was on when many people weren't, I'm going to just enjoy the ride, watching their possible last games here in the CS. And if they make it to the World Series, all luck to them, because Max Scherzer will be back for that as well. Here on the Solo Shot Sports Podcast, we like to throw it back down the third baseline to this day in sports history about a historic moment or thing that happened. And there were many moments that I could talk about. There was Jose Bautista's historic bat flipping home run in the ALDS. There was the Steve Bartman incident with the Cubs, agony defeat, talking about with that one, the thrill of victory with Jose Bautista. But when you look at just the day in history, that is, there was one moment that kind of stuck out to me. And it was because on this date, Walter Johnson retired from Major League Baseball. And I've talked about the big train many times on this podcast, but I don't think enough people really understand how good this man was. He has an 165.1 career WAR, third all time, 417 wins, a 2.17 ERA. He won the MVP 2 times because the Cy Young Award wasn't a thing. 3 Triple Crowns, 5 ERA titles, and in the 1924 World Series, he gave up his entire arm for that championship. Because if you look at his career after 1924, he was good. but he wasn't Walter Johnson. 20-7 in 1925 with a 3.07 ERA. 15-16 with a 3.63 ERA in 26, and his final season 5-6 with a 5.10 ERA in 1927. He hung it up after that. Nolan Ryan broke his strikeout record. He had 3,509, which stood for a long time because 3,000 Ks gets you automatically into the Hall of Fame. His 110 shutouts are the most in Major League Baseball history. He threw over 500 complete games and over 5,900 innings. Workhorse. The big train to me is the greatest pitcher that ever lived. And I don't feel like he's talked about that way. I know pitchers overall are very overlooked because they don't play every day. But as we've seen in this postseason, pitching, great pitching can really make a difference. And it's the one position typically that can take over a game, can single-handedly win you a game, is a great pitcher. There's some hitters and guys that are great all-around five-tool guys that can do that. But when you have someone on the mound like Walter Johnson, you feel good every single opportunity. So definitely check out Walter Johnson's page. He retired on this day. He was elected as the inaugural class of the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1936. And just an amazing baseball player that doesn't get the love of a Babe Ruth, of a Cy Young. But he was all that. And maybe then some. But now comes the time. I've been very bad at this season about picking who wins what series. So far, I have gotten 3 series right out of the 8 that have been played. Not good. And I'd be lying here if I said I was anywhere confident in these picks. Phillies Astros as a rematch to a lot of people would be fantastic. I think most people consider those the 2 best teams remaining. And we talked about dynasty talk and how the Astros have an opportunity that the Dodgers and Braves have thrown away, at least this year. I think the Astros will be able to fight Texas' lineup as well as anybody can. And you look across Diamondbacks and Phillies. The Phillies are playing on another level right now. Celebrations, confidence. But one of these 2 teams is going to get upset, if not both of them. But I have a feeling it's just going to be one of them. And when you look across the board at a Houston team that was just consistently good all season despite injuries, that has Dusty Baker at the helm, I think that's the team that can afford to go home. As much as I've talked about the dynasty, as much as I've talked about things, the Texas Rangers, with Nate Eovaldi, with Bruce Bochy, with that lineup, are going to the World Series. They beat my World Series pick in dominating fashion. And I'm not expecting them to dominate Houston. I'm expecting that to be a really good series. But I expect them to come out on top. Now, when you look across Diamondbacks and Phillies, I will not be mad at either team making it there. I think we talked about it with Arizona, where that comeback mentality, the fact they haven't lost a playoff game, the fact they have those 2 pitchers at the top of the rotation, they're going to give Philadelphia a fight. But when it comes down to it, this is a team that is unfinished business. a team that made it all the way to the World Series last year and didn't get it done. I got the Phillies and the Rangers making the World Series in a red October. Diamondbacks, nothing to commend them for. They've done amazing to get to this point, and it's all gravy, in my opinion. Making a World Series would be huge. Falling short, I think, would build character. But they have a young core. They have good pitcher. I'm giving them a swinger's chance. Regardless, I don't think we're going to see any sweeps. And I think that's beautiful. There's 2 rounds of playoffs. First round, all sweeps. Second round, 50% sweeps. The other 2 only won to a 4th game. They didn't even go to a winner takes all. We're going to see a game 7 in the NLCS, I think. I think Texas could take Houston in 6. But there's going to be fight on both sides, and it's just going to be great baseball. So whether you're a fan of a team that's still in it, a fan of just baseball like me, or somebody whose fantasy football team has just fallen apart with injuries, tune into this playoff baseball. It's going to be can't miss, starting with game 1 of the ALCS on Sunday. And I will catch you guys next Solo Shot Saturday, talking about the CS and what to look forward to in this amazing World Series. No matter which 2 teams of these 4 match up, it's going to be a good one because they all are managed well. They all have pitching to some extent, and their lineups all bang. Appreciate you spending part of your week with me, and I will catch you guys in the next.